Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into today's video. We're going to be doing JMA Friday today, having a look at the weather for the coming month across the British Isles, and this takes us into the second half of February. So we're going towards the back end of the winter really now with this update. Hasn't been much of a winter for cold and snow loads. Had a little cold snap over the last week or so, of course, but really it hasn't been much going on in terms of cold and snow so far this season. We'll have a look and see what the JMA and the CFS V2 are showing for the coming month, taking us into the second half of February. Excuse me. But before I get on with that, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on all pages at Gas Office. Have a browse through widgets and click through the links if there's any articles that you're interested in. Thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads, most pages which open out the content and you can watch them, they'll close back up again. It is helping to pay for our website. So we're going to start off with the Japanese model. These are 500 millibar heights broken down into weekly periods, and then we'll have a look at the CFS V2 and see what that's shown. As you know, 500 millibar heights, blue is extrapolating to low pressure, and orange, yellow, red extrapolating to high pressure. So the first weekly period that we're looking at here will be taking us from today, the 22nd of January, through to the 29th. We see that we've got low pressure, a trough of low pressure in the Atlantic. We've got ridging to the east of us. That's the high pressure at the beginning of some cold weather over the past week, but it is on its way out, and basically the idea is that the Atlantic is coming back through the coming week. Westerlies will be returning, already returning today, actually. So it's turning more unsettled through this week with Atlantic winds advancing, getting rid of that ridge, sending that off towards western parts of Russia. We go through to the next weekly period. This will take us from the 29th of January through to the 5th of February. And what we find with this one is that the Atlantic is in, basically. We've got low pressure up to the north, we've got high pressure down to the south, we've got jet stream coming right through the country, rather like that. So Atlantic winds advancing into the country, it'll be turning increasingly unsettled, or it will be very unsettled, with bands of rain coming across the country. The driest weather, of course, will always be to the south, close to this ridge of high pressure. But basically all places will be unsettled, with bands of rain coming in. And the westerlies are dominating. And then we go through to the final 2 weekly period. This taking us from the 5th through to the 19th of February, so going into the second half of the final month of winter. And no change really. The trough of low pressure is centred out to the north and west of the country through the Atlantic. The ridge may be easing off a bit down to the south, but the general idea is still low pressure coming through the country, bringing bands of rain. It'll be unsettled. The most unsettled condition will be in the north and west, but all places will get bands of rain coming through with this. As this ridge sort of moves down into the southeast of Europe, it's possible it could start to turn a bit colder through this trough. I think by this point the air is probably starting to originate more from Greenland and possibly Newfoundland, so maybe turning colder in this second half of February, but it is still Atlantic driven, so it's not a blocked cold scenario. It wouldn't be severely cold, but maybe a little bit colder there in the second half of February, but really quite unsettled. So that's for JMA. This is for CFS V2. Again, it's the same idea. 500 millibar heights broken down into weekly periods. So the first week period takes us from the 22nd through 28th of January, the week that we're currently in. And it's identical, really, to the JMA. So I've got this ridge here through central parts of Europe, which will increasingly be pushing to the east of Europe with low pressure in the Atlantic, bringing these Atlantic winds back into the country during the coming week, so turning more unsettled over the coming week with bands of rain moving through, possibly some quite strong winds as well. The next weekly period is again identical to the JMA, so we've got good agreement here between the two models. This is from the 29th of January through to the 4th of February. What we find with this one is that the ridge is to the south and the east. We've got the trough of low pressure up to the north and west. The Atlantic is coming through the country like that. So westerlies are coming through. It'll be unsettled. It'll be most unsettled in the north and west. It'll be dry-ish, but not completely dry in the south and southeast. It's Atlantic-driven pattern and generally probably fairly mild. We go through to week 3. This taking us from the 5th through to the 11th of February, and no change really. Low pressure is centred around Greenland and Iceland to the north and west of the country. we've got ridging to the south and the southeast of the country will remain in an Atlantic-driven pattern with the flow going something like that. So again, it's most unsettled in the north and west. It's driest in the south and southeast, but it's Atlantic-driven. And maybe turning a little bit cooler here as well, as cooler air could be coming around this trough, more from sort of Greenland and Newfoundland in the northern part of the Atlantic. So agreement there with the JMA as well. I think that as we move further on into February, it may start to turn cooler, albeit Atlantic driven. And then the final week, this is week 4, the 12th through to the 18th of February. That shows the trough weakening around Greenland Island and the ridge is pushing up from the south. So probably turning more settled in this period, around the middle part of February. That could be very pleasant, actually. The air could be starting to push up a little bit from the south and maybe from the Azores. So maybe a little bit of a taste of spring there through the middle part of February, albeit it could be fairly cold at night. But there's certainly no suggestion in any of these models, the JMA or CFSV2, there's no suggestion of anything really cold and wintry coming up to the middle part of February anyway. Temperature anomalies from the CFSV2 look like this for the coming months. So the next week is going to be very mild in those almost off the scale colours there, deep red colours. So very mild temperature anomalies through the coming week. The second week looks very mild as well. There we go. We're up there in the far right hand corner of the chart as you're looking at it. So another very mild week in the start of February. Week 3, that's looking mild, not quite as warm as the first couple of weeks, but still very significantly milder than average. And that just goes on into week 4 as well. So it's a bit of a disaster, this, for anybody wanting cold and snow. This suggests a very mild period coming up through the course of the coming month. And then finally, for precipitation over the next month, looks like this. So the coming week going to be wetter than average, significantly wetter than average, very unsettled. Week 2, the 29th of January to the 4th of February, looks a bit drier, especially down in the south. So we should turn a bit drier there, albeit we're still Atlantic driven. Week 3, from the 5th through to the 11th of February, that is looking a wetter than average week. Very Atlantic driven month coming up, of course. And then week 4, that turns out to be a bit wetter in the north, drier down in the south. And that's through the week, the 12th through to the 18th of February. So it's not great output this morning if you want cold weather. It looks like after this little cold snap that we've had over the past week or so, we're reverting back to the kind of scenario that we had in December, really, which is very Atlantic driven, very mild at times, and also wet at times, especially in the north and west, but all places getting bands of rain as well. Now, remember, these long-range models, the CFSV2 and the JMA, are highly experimental. They aren't to be relied upon by any means. They didn't really pick out the cold snap that we've just had all that well. So can it really be as bad as this over the next month? We're going to have to wait and see. But on the face of it anyway, it's a bit of an Atlantic onslaught coming up, taking us into February, and it'll be mild, wet, and probably quite windy at times as well. Right, that's month ahead, look ahead with the Japanese and CFSV2 models. Tomorrow we will be doing weekend forecast, and later on tomorrow, so that'll be around lunchtime. Then later on tomorrow, on Saturday evening, we'll have a look at the JMA for the next 3 months, going from, it'll be February, going through to April, so late winter into spring. We'll do that tomorrow evening with the JMA. Right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.